being recorded. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So like the main topic for this introduction session is understanding who PMs are and what product managers do. Basically, they're the person in charge of shipping products to a consumer or to a business. They're advocate for the consumer, so they understand like what does the consumer need, translate the needs into product goals and features. This person sets the vision and strategy for that certain product. And so there's a lot of involvement with the consumer and what their wants are and how to turn that into a product. And so going into the product life cycle. So the product life cycle includes research and planning, design, and implementation and test and release. And we're going to go through all those life cycles, right? So like I said, research and planning, design, implement and test and release. And so like what's the research and planning? And so that's basically the PM's wondering what's the next thing to build. And so he's understanding the customer and the needs of the customer, the challenges the challenges of the consumer faces through user research, new tech, competitive analysis, sales and marketing, etc. They use that understanding and research to come up with some idea. They also create like a roadmap, so basically a long-term plan, and talks to all possible resource sources to create a list of potential features and development work. They convince others to buy into the idea, and they become experts into that product or feature. They understand what and wants, so what and whys. And so basically what is the product use cases are, why are they building it, and what its features are. They also define what success looks like. So that's basically in the research and planning stage. So going to design. So what's design? This is designing the product and its features. Defining the features and functionality of the product. And to do this, PMs write something called product requirement documents. And this includes like product specs, such as goals, use cases, requirements, wireframes, description of every possible state of product / feature, and security, just to prevent inappropriate or unauthorized use of the product. They also get specs inspected and reviewed by either developers, testers, and other PMs. Find out who you'll be working with to implement this. And so this is something that PM does to find out who's going to be, who they'll be working with to implement these features. And then now going into implement and test. So this is where we're going to check in on who's going to implement these features and test them. So checking in with the engineering team consistently and checking on their progress. So that's something that PM does on a regular basis, helping the engineering team work as efficiently as possible, and also being proactive. That's very important. Example would be like an engineer is blocked because they're waiting on work for another team. You should work with the other team to get the work finished and more promptly, and find something else for the engineer to do in the meantime. So there's no like delay in time or mismanagement there. If implementation is tougher and takes longer than expected, you can change the product to make it easier to implement and review the scheduled work and deprioritize as needed. Start gathering feedback and report bugs on early versions of the product. And so I guess there's a term called dog booting, which is basically using the product yourself. So like those very first bugs or the early versions, as a PM, you'll be testing it yourself. run those usability studies. And so like usability studies are basically like getting other users to use it and study how they're using your product, run experiments with the product and analyze data to see how users react to the product, get product testing, and make sure any issues are fixed so that the product meets specifications. And now going into release, and so that's our last stage in the product lifecycle. Basically creating a launch checklist and make sure to run through it. This checklist can include getting any necessary final approvals from stakeholders or business partners, make sure support teams for product are prepared, have contingency plans for when things go wrong, and release your product. So basically shipping that product to consumers or your client, depending on what type of product this is. This can happen and vary just depending on your client or your consumer. Depending on whether your product is handed over to another team or not, gather metrics, user feedback, and iterate based on that. So basically, once your product is shipped, it's not done yet. You're going to be continuing to iterate newer releases as updates are to come or changes to your application are to come. And there's different types of products, and another thing is there's different types of products, and that's going to affect the job of a PM, right? So if the product is more technical and developer focused, and that's going to affect the PM's job. Depending on the product and work, they can change, right? And so I think this is where I list out different types of products and how they can change for a PM. So like shipping software, a PM will do more project management and will need good specs and good communication skills. Let's say online software, PMs will need to be good with data analysis, designing experiments, and need to be good under pressure. Consumer products, PMs will not make decisions, but will make proposals to engineering teams. Business to business products, PMs will be experts on the customer. That's very true. That's exactly what I do. I do business to business products. Early stage, PMs will need to execute quickly and deprioritize non-essential features. And mature stage, that's going to be where PMs will iterate on the product and try to improve it. So I guess you can tell like the least amount of work a PM does is probably the mature stage, where it's just iterating the product and just pushing out these smaller updates. And the early stage is complete opposite, where they have to be on their feet, executing very quickly, and not micromanaging things. And so I think that's all for this introduction, and we're going to go right into questions. And I know this is a lot of content, but the thing is, I recorded it and have the slides up so you guys can, read it through and get it in your head, understanding what PMs are and what the product lifecycle is. And this is just an overview, and we'll definitely go into more details. And if you guys have any questions, just either talk or just send it in the chat.
Hi, Latera here. Just kind of curious on when we'll get some information about kind of the course load and what to expect. I'm assuming that's
Yeah,
something that
totally sorry
Allvr is
about that.
working on.
Just give me a second. Let me just pull up the course load. That's good point there. So let's see. Okay. Oh. Can you guys see my screen, or is it?
It's still in the PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna go. Anyway, so let's go to the product course, and we're basically looking at week 1, and so it's 4 weeks, and then week 1 is basically introduction, which I just did today, and then we're gonna go into understanding customers, opportunity research. Week 2, it's a lot. We're gonna be doing validation, UX design process, a review on basically everything that we did, SWOT analysis, and then we're going to have a project. Um, the information about the project will be sent out to everybody in week 2. There's actually 2 projects that we'll have. So we'll have a project in week 2, and then we'll have a project in week 4. And then going to week 3, we have engineering process, launching your product, PRDs, which I just talked about, MVPs, and those are minimum viable products. Well, we'll learn about that. And then week 4 is examining the development of product and then final project. So final project hint, we'll be working on MVPs. And then the PM project is, I think, more about personas and understanding your product. But more details to come in week 2. Does that answer everybody's questions on timeline? And I guess expectations are, you should, it would be beneficial if you do show up to these live sessions, but not necessary. Just being active and, working on the projects are probably the most important. And we'll be having teams and people, it's not just individual projects. It'll just be like people joining teams and working on these. Anybody new? I think they just joined in. Have any questions?
Hi, this is Amy. I have a question. Is the meeting times the same time every week, like on noon
Yeah,
on Saturday?
so I'm gonna take a vote. I'm gonna take a vote because there's a lot of people in like different time zones, and so I had to figure out what's the best time for everybody. I know there's some people in India. I think I recently saw there's like about 9 different time zones. Um, does everybody, or is everybody comfortable with this time zone? Like whoever's on this call?
I'm good with this.
I'm good with this as well.
Okay.
Yeah, the same works for me.
Okay. Yeah, I'll still take a vote. I know this is pretty late for some of you. I'll take a vote. I know some people don't like it in the morning and they prefer it like later in the evening. I think I'm gonna go ahead
Well,
and email out and then we'll vote.
can we not just schedule it around, like, 1 hour and 30 minutes earlier, like that would be 11 p.m. in India.
Oh,
So
okay.
that would,
Sure. Yeah, I'll take in thought about that's actually a good idea, and that's where my thoughts are going at. But I'm gonna still take a vote, get everybody's input, even for the people
yeah,
who show up to the call.
sure.
Yeah. Any more questions about just just anything? Doesn't have to be related to our introduction session.
I was wondering how long these sessions are going to be.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So like this one, for example, would be like 30 to 40 minutes. So each session would be about, I think, let's go close to an hour. And so just because there's going to be questions at the end. I think the overall content itself would be 30 minutes or to like 45 minutes. And yeah, I'll probably tend to kind of rush into the content a little bit just because we have a lot of information. I'll be even sending out the meeting notes for this introduction course, so you guys can read over the detailed information I just talked about. I think that'll be beneficial. So yeah, you're looking anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes in terms of content. Overall meeting would be an hour. Anybody else with questions?
Why the name is Allvr? Is there any meaning to it?
That's a good question. I'm actually not sure. I think it's something in Latin, or I guess you can say all virtual, right? So because we're all, virtually here. So yeah, there's not really a proper meaning or anything that I'm aware of. I think maybe Brian might know.
I have a question regarding a PM role.
Yeah,
How often, if you have any, do you guys do any like customer facing engagements?
that's a good question. Yeah. So there are things called like user testing, and so it depends on like what kind of PM you are. So if you're doing like business to consumer, and there's a lot of consumers, um, sorry, just clicked on something. But if there's a lot of consumers, right, like you're working on a pretty big product and there's like thousands of users, you'll have user studies, and that's where a PM will walk into a room. There might be a subset of users in your criteria, and you would be testing them, either testing them through data analysis, and so that's basically looking up that criteria of users and checking their data and understanding what those users are doing. And so that's a way of testing on what they're doing right or wrong. And you can do that through the application when developers like send out updates or like say, hey, you're in beta testing, etc. Or it works when you bring them all into a room. This works with mostly, I think, hardware products where they bring customers or they bring X amount of consumers and their criteria into a room, and they test out either it'll be like food or like products such as like hardware, and then they'll get like user tests. And I think that's more accurate, but at the same time, it's not as natural because they're all like in one room testing out a product. But when it comes to software, it's just like, you know, a beta test that's sent out to everybody remotely, and then just testing out the data, or they're just looking up the data for that criteria users without them knowing. And so that's even more natural. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on questions about, I guess, PMs and, you know, user studies and understanding customers?
I have a question about the program. Can you give us more details about the projects, like what are we going to do and that kind of things?
Yeah, of course. So um, I'll have a detailed report out for the PM project and the final project. Like, I'll do that in week 2. How about that? So week 2, I'll send out like a detailed report of what the PM project and final project looks like, so that you all have time to make teams and collaborate. Another thing about Allvr is that when you create these projects and teams, we actually have them posted on our website, you know, kind of like a, I guess, a LinkedIn slash skill story or Skillshare type of way. And so that's basically showing off like the product that you built, um, the MVP, the work you've done, the teams you're in. And so we'll all be showing that week 2. I think this week 1 it's just an introduction. We'll have another session in this week going over understanding customers and opportunity research, because I didn't go over that in this session. But yeah, I'll get more information to you either by end of this week or week 2. That's for everybody.
Thank you.
What are the potential prospects of this coursework? Like, what can you get after? I mean, what can we expect to get after?
Yeah, that's a good question. So our expectations is that like this will, you know, this will get you like what is it, opportunities in the PM space. And so like, you know, if you guys need it, if you guys need to, you know, be part of the community, I think Brian's definitely, you know, a good source, someone just to talk to. Hey, you know, like, could you refer me here or there, right? This is mostly, I think, just building up your skills, getting to understand, um, I guess, the course and what it's like to be a PM. And then just having this on your resume is very beneficial. Another thing is that we see a lot of like different, I guess, apprenticeships where they don't really show off their uh, project work or what they did within the course. And so we designed it in a way that just like Skillshare, we're going to be showing off your skills either by recording them or, you know, having presentations, etc. I'll go more into details into that like next week, and so that kind of gives you an opportunity to I guess, prepare.
Fair enough.
We have about 10 more minutes. Anybody else?
Can I ask a question? I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with this program, but I was wondering, like, how did you get started in this field? Because I understand that it's something new. So it's just a question for you. How did you get started?
Oh, sorry about that. I'm just that's a good question. I'll go through that first. I just saw like there's a bunch of other questions in the chat. So that's a very good question. How did I get started? That's so I didn't go the traditional route. So I think I I'm I'm a computer science major, graduated from University of California, Davis. And as a CS major, I most of my internships were software related, so I was a software engineer. I think one internship in general in Pacific was it was a data science intern at first, but then later on it turned into a product role. And then I was basically an assistant to the product manager. And that's where I started learning about, what is it like to be a product owner or a product manager for a certain product. Um, and also being a data scientist, right? So like a data scientist would like get like key metrics and KPIs, and I understood that a product manager also involves heavily with somebody who's a data scientist, right? Because they're always looking at metrics and data analysis. And so that's where I approached product management, and then once I joined management consulting with Big Four at Deloitte, I had the opportunity to be a PM there, and so I worked with like different companies like healthcare and like SaaS companies where I was more involved in the PM role. Later on, involved into the actual digital side where we actually create products for the firm. So the firm creates like its own products, and that's where I was more involved into like actually being a product manager within the company and working on their products. And so that's how I got into product management officially, is because I first started somewhere you might not think you would become a product manager, and then slowly within the company, working your way to becoming a product manager. It's just being open and talking to your peers and your managers and telling them what you want. I think that can work in like different startup environments, fast-moving management consulting firms. If you don't get into a PM as an intern or as a full-time job, sometimes going into the software engineering route within a smaller company, you can move into product management um, much quicker than a traditional company or a Fortune 500.
That's awesome. Thanks
Yeah,
for sharing.
of course. I'm gonna be taking a look at the questions in the chat. So I think Tahamid said, I was wondering what exactly what we'll be doing in this program, if there are any supplementary resources a new person could use. So that's a good question. So what exactly you'll be doing in this program? You'll be learning, you'll be building, and you'll be connecting with different speakers. And so I think one thing I forgot to talk about is that we're gonna have speakers within this 4 weeks, and so you're gonna be connecting with like people from different industries, maybe from LinkedIn or Facebook. These are different product managers, and they'll be like talking about how they got where they got, and you can connect with them and ask any questions, building things. And we're going to build like MVPs, and we're going to build personas, and different PM projects, and we'll go more into detail. They're much more complex than what I just said. And as a new person, I think just sit down tight. That's one thing we don't want to do. We don't want to just throw a bunch of material at you. We do want to make this feel like an actual course, where you'll be more involved in coming into our sessions. And then just sit down tight, and we'll just be sending you material week by week. And are we going to have a session every day at the same time? I think, again, just answering that again, I'm going to check on the time. It's most likely going to be, I guess, 11 a.m. just by the looks of it, on a Saturday and Sunday. So we're probably just going to be doing Saturday and Sunday sessions that are going to be live. And if there's any recorded sessions, they're going to be during the weekday for you guys to take a look at. Please, I wish to know to use a different approach if we want to provide a service instead of a product. A service instead of a product. Okay. So if you're providing a service instead of a product, so like let's say a service would be like, I guess in consulting, you're providing a service by, let's say, you're providing a development team. So like if your entire company or your product is like a service to provide different companies with a development team, it's kind of the same approach for a product, because a service can be categorized in a product in a way that you're still selling something and you're still getting it to your consumers. There are some differences, and we'll go over that in another session, but it's most of the time it's very similar. And then same thing with business to business products. It's just depending on your consumer or your customer. All these products can be services or actual products or hardware products, software products, etc. It really doesn't matter. It all comes down to who your customer is and who your consumer is, right? And definitely we'll go more into detail in this week or the coming week. Any more questions? I think we have like 2 more minutes here, 3 more minutes here.
Well, about me, I'm currently a product manager at an early stage startup. Okay, it's based in India and it's B2B startup. And I mean, here in my company, I do take decisions. So, as an experienced product manager, what advice would you give to someone who is very early in his career to apply at companies like Google and Amazon for the product management roles? I've done some research on Google. It's more of a technical side. So how can I strengthen my technical side more on from a product management?
I interviewed there for full time. I think I went to all the rounds, but it just didn't get to the hiring committee. And so that was the tough part for me. I don't know. They don't really give you feedback on the hiring committee, but in terms of like their technical side for as a product manager, I think Brian will probably say the same thing. Just speaking on behalf of him, the technical side for becoming a product manager is very high level. So like understanding how APIs work, that's all you need to know. You don't need to know how to code things. You don't need to know how to, solve leak code problems. Your job your interview when you go into Google or Facebook, they're gonna ask you questions on, oh, do you understand this data structure? That's probably at most the technical questions they'll ask you. Do you understand APIs? Can you draw kind of a wireframe on how an API works? They might give you different scenarios and real life scenarios on how to web applications work. And so these are very high level thinking, right? And so there's some excellent books out there that I'll probably share with everybody. I think Cracking the PM book is really good in terms of talking about how to approach technical questions. All these technical questions are high level, and the book's free if you're in this course, and so I'll be sharing that as well. Yeah, thanks, Rohan. Any more? Did that answer everything?
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. It would be great if you can kind of share your experience, or let's say some summarized points on your experience of interviewing at Google or wherever you have interviewed like big companies.
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep
I
in
had
mind. And
I had one last question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So everyone here seems to be like experienced in some way in product management, but I've never even like the first time I heard about product management was like 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering how I could get as much out of this program as everyone else could.
Yeah, this actually, we have a pretty diverse group. I know like the people on the call, like there might be like a few experienced people, but a lot of people in this group, majority of them are actually new to product management. And the coursework that's here, it's for a beginner. It's for somebody who's doesn't know anything about product management and they're learning it for the first time. And that's basically our course. This is very beneficial even for the people who are still experienced because they can easily go through the content and they can just worry about maybe the projects. But the people who are new here are going to be more involved in the coursework. And so that's why we have a coursework here. And don't worry, I think this pace is pretty good because we're going to give you like a whole week just to study like, the material. And the material isn't too hard to go through. It's just kind of reading through and going through examples.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, guys. I think I'm going to stop it here. Any more questions, just message me on Slack. And I'll send out the recording end of today.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Appreciate it.